परिचयात् त्वदुपाय भावे प्राप्ये त्वयि स्वयमुपेयतया स्फुरन्त्या नित्याश्रिताय निरवद्य गुणाय तुभ्यं स्यां किङ्करो वृषगिरीश न जातु मह्यम्.
We are a people of many nations, molded by different gods and diverse histories, brought together shoulder to shoulder to forge a common destiny. Ours is a formidable challenge. In times of fortune, we live with respect and tolerance, content to share the air and the love that surrounds us. But in the face of adversity, our differences become apparent, our insecurity tangible, and our fear leads us to raise our hand against one another. The challenge that we face is not new. Our fathers and their fathers before them trod a similar path. They had the same needs, prejudices, expectations and fears, and they found a way around the obstacles. Against the odds, they built a strong and stable foundation upon which we, their children, can build our future. How we do so is up to us. Today, we celebrate the 100th anniversary of the birth of one of those great men. He was the father of our nation, our Chacha, the late Dr. the Right Honorable Sir Seewoosagur Ramgoolam. His is a story of endeavor, of victory and glory, of frustration and sorrow. His is the story of the birth of a new nation.
When slavery was abolished, the Franco-Mauritian sugar barons turned to India as a source of cheap labor. Between 1834 and 1912, more than 450,000 Indians signed incomprehensible contracts and boarded ships in Calcutta, Madras and Bombay. After a 5-week journey of fear and sickness across the dark sea, the indentured laborers were quarantined, processed like cattle, and distributed to the landlords. The Hindu and Muslim peasants, fleeing the drought and instability of their motherland, were quick to realize that the promises of a better life and riches in the far-off paradise of Mauritius were false. Mauritian Ramgoolam, immigrant number 353639, arrived in 1871. For 12 years he worked as a laborer on La Queen Victoria sugar estate, where living conditions were pitiful and the laborious tasks broke men like brittle twigs. Mahit persevered and managed to save enough money to marry a young widow, Basmati Ramchurn, and together they lived in the small village of Belrive. Seewoosagur Ramgoolam, or Kewal as his family knew him, was born to Mahit and Basmati on the 18th of September 1900. In those days, the Hindu community sent their children to the Baitka, where they were taught their own language and culture. But for Kewal, this was not satisfactory. One day, he followed the older boys and girls to another, and in his eyes, real school. The teacher at the Roman Catholic school must have been charmed by the tenacity of this young Indian boy, who turned up at her class and presumed to admit himself to her teaching. And so began Kewal's romance with education, a facet of life he would always indulge in, encourage, and eventually transform. Kewal's father died in 1907, leaving the boy in the care of his stepbrother, Ramlal Ramchurn, who in comparison to most Indian immigrants had prospered through his work. He held an important supervisory position with the Beauchamp estate and was amongst the first Indian immigrants who were able to buy land. Through hard work and determination, these small planters cleared their own meager fields, planted their own cane, and eventually formed the financial backbone of the Indo-Mauritian community. By the time Kewal was catching the train to Bel Air Government School, life for the Indo-Mauritians had improved, but they were still a disenfranchised underclass in a country that they had adopted as their own. A few people had addressed their plight, notably an adherent of Mahatma Gandhi, Manilal Doctor, who in the early 1900s spread his teachings of traditional Indian culture and inspired the Indo-Mauritians to empower themselves through education and organization. But an English governor was still ruling the country, essentially controlled by the oligarchy of Franco-Mauritian landowners. Their only real political opposition came from an increasingly powerful lobby of colored and Creole elite who challenged the status quo. In 1911, violent clashes occurred between the working classes and Franco-Mauritians, the first communal riots on the island since the slave uprising in 1832. Kewal passed through his early classes without difficulty and was sent on to Currapip Boys Government School. On the weekends, he would return home to his village to help his family and enjoy the familiarity of his favorite playgrounds. On one weekend, Kewal decided to help his stepbrother Ramlal by moving the ox to where it was normally fed. Luckily, Kewal's cries for help were heard before he eventually fainted from the pain. But in 1912, medical facilities available to the rural Mauritians were virtually non-existent, and 12-year-old Kewal's eye could not be saved. This was his fate, to wear a glass orb in place of a seeing eye, the handicap well compensated for by a vision uncommon even to men of perfect sight. The determined and tenacious Kewal was eventually rewarded by being admitted to the Royal College in Currapip, an exceptional achievement, considering that Royal College was a bastion of white and colored education. He developed a love for English, the language that would open the world to him. At Royal College, he learnt the art of behaving like an English gentleman. His manners, dress style, and culture of fair play, tolerance and understanding would stay with him for all his life. He completed his schooling in 1920, and the following year set sail for England aboard the Luxor, leaving behind him a Mauritius that was still socially, politically, and economically divided along racial lines. In London, he settled into the boarding house of the Indian Students' Association, set about completing his London matriculation, and finally entered the School of Medicine at University College London. Medicine was what he was studying, but politics is what he learned. As a student activist, Seewoosagur met and was influenced by Indian leaders like Nehru, Patel, Jinnah, and Krishna Menon. He moved from observer to participant, became the organizing secretary for the Indian Students' Union, and then a member of its executive council. Seewoosagur was influenced by the works of Tennyson, Eliot, Shaw, Bennett, and Galworthy, and by the Fabian Society, of which he became a dedicated follower. The days were spent at the School of Medicine, the evenings and long nights with dynamic friends, debating reformed socialism and human rights. Life in London was certainly educational, but definitely not easy for Seewoosagur. Fortunately for him, he met Ghulam Mohammed Acha, who was in London with a Mauritian delegation.
So Ramgoolam, during one of these meetings, he asked my father, look, in what state I am, I can't continue my study. He had to stop his studies, in fact, because his parents, relatives, were no longer able to send him any money. November 1933. My dear Ghulam Ahmad being the name of my father naturally. My brothers later received by me a few days ago informed me of your kindness towards me and of the personal interest you are so generously
taking in my career since your return to the colony. By this noble act of yours, you have conferred upon me a great privilege, a privilege I shall value very high as long as I am alive. It is very difficult for me to find words in which to express my heartfelt gratitude. At the time of writing to you, I am in debt to the amount of £9, owing to the fact that the last money received was in the very early part of September. To add to this, the winter has come. I have neither a decent overcoat nor a proper suit in which to go about. I wish I had some money to enable me to supply myself with these little amenities of life. I am very grateful to all of you. To say more would spoil your noble act. I hope that God will keep me strong and healthy to prove myself worthy of the faith you have so generously reposed in me. With best wishes to yourself and my thanks, yours sincerely, S. Ramgoolam.
In 1935, after 14 years abroad, Dr. Ramgoolam returned to his motherland, Mauritius. He settled into a humble home in Port Louis and set up his practice in the small room adjoining the veranda. As a doctor, he traveled the country and met and administered to all Mauritian classes.
He was the doctor in Chinatown. I didn't say in India town. I said Chinatown. He was a man of Indian extraction, and yet he was popular among the Chinese. I think for him there was no distinction, really. You can feel that he considers you just as one of his own.
Underneath, he was a born politician, sensitive to the feelings of those around him, intuitive in the art of compromise, persuasive and honest. He was neither pretentious nor condescending.
He comes back towards the end of 1935 at a crucial point in time, because it is at the end of 1935 and then in 1936 that the community of Indian descent in Mauritius in those days celebrates with great pomp the 100th anniversary of the arrival of the coolies, of the indentured laborers.
But those who were there, they become a sort of role model for us. And we were very much inspired by what they said. And among them was, of course, Dr. Ramgoolam, who was a bit more down to earth, let me say, because he was influenced much more by the Indian politicians in London.
I think SSR brought over a little bit of that Fabianism in Mauritius. The core of Fabian thinking was that what was needed was not a revolution, but an evolution.
Dr. Ramgoolam's words, and those of the other Indian professionals who formed the core of the Indian Cultural Society, were directed at the intellectuals. The Advance, a newspaper started by him, Onat Bijidar, Raymond Rowe, and other professionals, was also aimed at the intellectuals. And although they spoke for all classes, their message had a limited appeal. In the meantime, Dr. Maurice Curie, a Creole activist, was organizing and politicizing the sugar estate laborers.
The Labour Party was a radical party in those days, public meetings throughout the country, challenging the class composition of the society, calling for a complete change of Mauritius and so on. And that developed into massive strikes.
With the protest came the violence. On August 12, 1936, 200 angry laborers, armed with sticks and pieces of sugarcane, marched on the Union Flax Sugar Estate. The managers, armed with live ammunition, fired directly into the crowd. The mob scattered and fled, leaving 4 dead and 10 wounded, the first Mauritians in the island's history to be killed during rioting. In those days, Dr. Ramgoolam was close to the colonial authorities and even clashed with Kure's labor movement. In 1940, the governor, in need of moderate Indian representation, appointed the doctor to the municipal council. To the labor leaders and other progressive political activists like Bastio Bisundiar, who had returned from India to start the Hindu Cultural Review, Dr. Ramgoolam appeared to be selling out their cause. But while they were agitating and politicizing the working classes, Dr. Ramgoolam was in the council pleading for the same cause. He was elected mayor of Port Louis, and for a while his visionary speeches were the only words that reached the ears of the colonial government.
There is nothing in the budget that deals with any project for the betterment of workers, who after 50 years of hard work are unprovided for when they can work no more. It should be the primary duty of the government to stimulate social reforms in this island, and it should provide for these measures in the budget and not sit on the fence looking to see from which direction the wind blows.
In 1941, Dr. Ramgoolam married Seewoosagur Ramgoolam and began a family life that would bear him 2 healthy children in the years to come.
But yes, he used to make us not only read at the foot of the bed, read, but then know what words we are using. If we don't know what the word means, get the dictionary, open the dictionary, find the English word, find the French word. We used to hate it.
Dr. Ramgoolam continued working from inside the Council of Government, and by 1946 he was joined by other illustrious and outspoken men like the Tamil barrister Renganaden Sinivasen, the powerful Muslim leader Razak Mohammed, and the white champion of Creoles, Jules Koenig. With pressure bearing down on the colonial office from all sides, the new governor, Mackenzie Kennedy, devoted himself to drafting a new constitution.
You had 2 constitutional conferences in 45 and 46 to prepare a new constitution. This is when Ramgoolam moved closer and closer to the Mauritius Labour Party. He rubbed shoulders with progressives and then finally joined the Labour Party. And then the big bang came in 1948, where everybody who could write his name in any local language had a right to vote, and therefore the number of voters jumped, as I said, from a few thousand to more than 70,000.
In the 1948 elections, Dr. Ramgoolam was originally nominated by the Labour Party, but he disagreed with their other choice of candidates, so he split with Labour and stood as an independent.
And the result was to be expected. All the white representatives and the colored representatives, and even the Hindu owners that stood as, were all wiped out. And they were all wiped out by progressive elements.
The independent nominees, essentially the intellectuals, won 8 out of the 19 seats, and once they were in power, they were poised to change the face of the Labour leadership. Dr. Ramgoolam was appointed to the Executive Council, and for the first time, the Mauritian working class had people of their own choice representing them in government.
The way I remember, not only my father, not only Uncle Kewal, but all the friends that used to meet at my house, they were motivated by some very pure ideals, I think. They had something in mind to better the situation of the poor, of the workers, and they worked only for this ideal.
He was a very strong personality, wanted us to do things right. He always told us there are no 2 ways to do something right. There's one right way and the other ones are not right.
Despite their opposition often being squashed by the governor's 12 nominated representatives, Dr. Ramgoolam and the Labour Party effectively campaigned for the improvement of the lives of the previously disenfranchised communities. Their hard work and loyalty would pay off in the elections of 1953.
What I consider probably to be the summum when the Labour Party was at its peak was 1953. The Labour Party was still a class party, presenting candidates from every community, and they won. It was a beautiful victory.
Guy Rosemont, the Labour Party president, died in 1956 and was succeeded by another Creole, Guy Forget. But Dr. Ramgoolam remained the party's de facto leader, shaping the future with Renganaden Sinivasen.
the fact that Guy Rosemont died in 56, then Renganaden Srinivasan died in 58, left Ramgoolam more or less completely free to decide which way the Labour Party would go.
Dr. Ramgoolam was catapulted to the forefront of politics at a time when the first communal lines were being drawn. As circumstances would have it, he and the Labour Party came to represent the Hindu majority, while their minorities flocked to his opposition, the Ralliement Mauritian. The country was split in two, the communalism further entrenched when Labour made a formal alliance with the Comité d'Action Musulmane, a Muslim group under Razak Mohammed. Opposition to Labour gained momentum and strength. Jules Kinnick, leader of Ralliement Mauritian, attacked Dr. Ramgoolam at every opportunity he could. According to him, a government under Hindu domination would be the end of Western civilization and Christian tolerance in Mauritius. Ralliement Mauritian, renamed Parti Mauritian, became allied with Busundayal's independent forward bloc, and their support was further bolstered by the arrival of the charismatic Creole leader, Gaëtan Duval. Despite the strong opposition, the Labour-CAM alliance managed to win the 59 elections. But the road ahead was fraught with distrust and suspicion between all communities.
It must be recognized that he was the first to come out in favor of independence in 1959, and he ran into trouble within the Labour Party of those days. He met with opposition within the Labour Party.
Dr. Ramgoolam had to tread carefully between his fragile Creole support, the demands of the Hindu majority, and his own vision of a united Mauritius.
In an atmosphere of freedom and equality, a new spirit and endeavor will seize our people, and in this century of hope, a new Mauritius will be born, unfettered and friendly, small but with the indomitable spirit to make good with other nations. There will be no prison bars of colonialism, no discrimination between one Mauritian and another, but a united country fulfilling its own destiny.
At the Constitutional Conference of 1961, the Colonial Office, under the guidance of Secretary of State Ian MacLeod, gave their support to Dr. Ramgoolam and the Labour Party's demand for independence.
But we understood all the time that British, as you know, were going to do it step by step, preparing the country for that.
60,000 people greeted them on their victorious return to Plaisance Airport. In accordance with the gradual transformation to self-governance, Dr. Ramgoolam was made Chief Minister of Mauritius on the 29th of September 1961. The elections of 1963 approached and was marked by a renewed effort on the part of Gaëtan Duval to scuttle Dr. Ramgoolam's plans for eventual independence. Parti Mauritian's campaign was openly communal, and party agents intimidated the electorate, agitating the prevalent fear. Duval urged the Creoles to vote for him in order to save Mauritius from Hindu dominance.
Again, Adele Swiss-Simons records that the 1963 general elections were the first general elections where one political party, that is the Parti Mauritian, campaigned on a communal platform all out.
Some of the Labour candidates responded with communal slandering, but it is significant that Dr. Ramgoolam himself did not launch a communal campaign. His hardest job was to balance his choice of candidates so as not to alienate voters along the lines of race and caste. The effectiveness of Parti Mauritian's campaign was evident in the results. Labour lost 4 seats and were too short of a majority. Dr. Ramgoolam had lost ground since 1959, and although he had survived his toughest political battle, he needed to brace himself for the arduous trials that lay ahead. The run-up to the final round of constitutional negotiations was marked by an increased communal tension boosted by the rhetoric of party leaders. Violence erupted in May 1965 between supporters of Parti Mauritian and a new reactionary party, the Hindu Congress. The leaders of both parties lost control of their thugs, the death toll rose, and people started to talk of civil war. Dr. Ramgoolam, well respected on both sides of the conflict, managed to bring the leadership under control but had no choice other than to accept the governor's imposition of a state of emergency. British troops were brought in to quell the violence. Labour leaders blamed Duval, Duval blamed the Hindu Congress. But whoever was to blame, the bloodshed and open racial conflict set the mood for the planned negotiations in London. The debates of the Constitutional Conference of 1965 were between full autonomy and independence as espoused by Ramgoolam and the Labour Party, or continued association with Britain, which was the desire of Duval and the Parti Mauritian, who also wanted the issue to be put to the people through a referendum.
And indeed, maybe if there had been a referendum on that specific point, with London making believe that association was still an option, maybe the referendum would have gone against independence. And that was the blackmail. London obtained that Seewoosagur Ramgoolam and the others agreed to the Chagos archipelago being detached from our territory to create a brand new colony, the British Indian, so-called British Indian Ocean Territory, in violation, in contravention of a previous United Nations resolution. And in between, everybody forgot about the Ilois, some 2,000 Ilois people who had been there for generations, as I said. They were just considered to be contract laborers, and later on they were just uprooted, simply uprooted in the most brutal way, in total violation of their human rights, and dumped in Mauritius, and some of them in the Seychelles.
I'm very sorry that my friends of the Parti Mauritian had withdrawn from the conference yesterday on a matter of detailed policy. I'm sure they don't disagree with me that Mauritius should have a better status. And that status, to my mind, cannot be anything else but independence.
Despite Parti Mauritian's boycott of the final session, the conference came to an end. The Mauritian delegations agreed to the detachment of the Chagos archipelago, and the colonial secretary announced that Her Majesty's government had come to the conclusion that Mauritius should become independent. There would be a general election, and if the majority of the House of Parliament voted in favour, then Mauritius would become independent. On their return to Mauritius, the party leaders set about preparing for the 67 elections that would determine whether Mauritians wanted independence or not. Dr. Sir Seewoosagur Ramgoolam was made Premier of Mauritius in accordance with the constitutional changes. In the run-up to the 1967 elections, Duval and the Parti Mauritian's popularity grew. Duval attracted immense crowds to his meetings, where he eloquently and dynamically tore into Ramgoolam's campaign and turned the crowds against independence. Sir Seewoosagur became increasingly concerned as Indian members of Labour and their ally CAM started defecting to Parti Mauritian. Pressure from Hindu radicals in the party and an alliance between the IFB and the All-Mauritian Hindu Congress further dismayed the Labour leader. To avoid being squeezed between Parti Mauritian and the IFB Congress alliance, Ramgoolam agreed to a coalition between Labour, IFB and the CAM in order to maintain a united front in support of independence. Ramgoolam was forced to make a number of concessions, and the alliance entered the elections under the banner of the Independence Party.
Pas vote comme hindou, Creole, chinois ou musulman. Vote comme madame, monsieur, avec vibration de liberté et de votre destinée dans le cœur. Et pour une occasion historique qui nous est là devant nous. Là où a fait voter pour l'avenir et l'indépendance. Quand vous votez, imagine l'avenir au pays. Imagine nos enfants qui pour hériter ce pays-là. Imagine l'île Maurice indépendante, fière.
On Election Day, August 7, 1967, violence erupted in Port Louis between Muslim supporters of CAM and Creole and Chinese supporters of Parti Mauritian. It flared into full-scale communal riots. Police used tear gas against the crowds, and by evening the governor appeared on television calling for calm. Early the next morning the votes were counted. The results were very close. By a margin of only 6%, the Independence Party was voted into a majority. 56% of the electorate had voted for independence, with Sir Seewoosagur Ramgoolam as their leader. But in the months that followed, all the tensions of the election campaign exploded. The most serious riots in Mauritian history swept Port Louis. The riots were communal. Muslim and Creole gangs clashed, and each corpse found signaled retaliation and revenge. For a time it appeared that Sir Seewoosagur's dream would be shattered. After 10 days of rioting, the violence subsided, but the island had never seen such crude and cruel behavior. 25 people were left dead and hundreds were injured. Despite the bitter taste, the ongoing communal hatred, and the continued presence of British troops, Sir Seewoosagur pressed ahead with plans for independence celebrations. In the face of rumors that desperadoes would violently attempt to prevent the Union Jack being lowered, thousands of people attended the celebrations at Chacha and emotionally witnessed the end of a century and a half of British rule. On March the 12th, 1968, Mauritius became a sovereign state, and Dr. Sir Seewoosagur Ramgoolam was made the country's first Prime Minister. The economic chaos that some people expected to follow independence never materialized, and the country seemed set to flourish as an independent nation. But Sir Seewoosagur now faced his biggest challenge of all. The 44% who had voted against independence were feeling marginalized and insecure.
They feel that they have been betrayed, they don't have no place, there is no room for them in the government and so on. Why not have a reconciliation? Because after all, we cannot continue living like this. He said, yes, I agree. Then Juval came in.
He made an alliance with the leader of the opposition at the time, not because he wanted to have a big majority in parliament. The real reason was that he wanted to bring unity in the country. He did not want a country divided right in the middle.
When they joined in, and the first thing they did was to amend the constitution, that the elections of 1967 would be considered to have been held in 1971. So therefore postponing general elections that should have been held in 1972. So in our minds, it was always in our mind that it was Juval who had asked for that. When you look at history, you know, when you go back to the text, to the you see Juval telling the people that the coalition government is nearly on, but one of the difficulties remaining is Seewoosagur Ramgoolam's insistence that general elections be postponed. Now, I'm not saying that Juval was a political saint. I'm just saying that you have that Seewoosagur on a human level was somebody fantastic, very nice person, but very rusé, very shrewd, to the point of having Juval, bear the burden of this postponement of elections.
Sir Seewoosagur's problems were not over. The vacuum left by Juval was filled by a new opposition, a young revolutionary party, the Mouvement Militant Mauritian, led by the fiery trade unionist Paul Béranger.
It's a complicated thing that they had tried to kill me. They killed somebody in the car following. It turned out into a general strike, and we, the victims, ended up in jail for the whole of 1972. 18 of us, leaders of the young party.
The opposition at the time were using tactics which were typical of the communist regime. They just wanted to bring society down, to bring the country down. There were strikes all over the place. They didn't want to negotiate. Power cuts, everything that you can think of. And I don't think, because as a head of government. Ultimate responsibility for the running of the country must rest with you. I think reluctantly, he tried everything, but reluctantly he had to impose a state of emergency.
And he had made the point, Mahatma Gandhi, that you must know what kind of opponent you have before you go on hunger strike. If you have a decent human being, you have somebody with a soft human heart and so on, yes, you can go on hunger strike. But if you have a thug, political thug or otherwise, if you have a rough character, thugging, don't go on a hunger strike. You know. So, with Ramgoolam as Prime Minister, yes, we went on hunger strike, and he would never have allowed me and the others to die there.
Looking back at some of the unfortunate and repressive measures of the early 70s, I find it extremely hard to understand how Sir Seewoosagur Ramgoolam came to be associated with, came to be party to certain actions which were completely alien to his philosophy and ideology as a recognized humanist and as a promoter of human rights.
It did not take long for the country to settle down, and Mauritians soon began to feel the economic benefits of Sir Seewoosagur's vision. The national divide had been bridged, independence became an accepted fact, and the Mauritian people began to enjoy a new sense of patriotism.
At that time, people, Mauritians, didn't believe in industrialization. All they think about is sugar, 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 that's all. There was that obsession of sugar. And when you talk about industrialization, people think that you are dreaming, that the doctor is dreaming. When I talk about it, they say, you as usual, you're an idealist, you are dreaming. But I think sometimes dreams are necessary.
Under the prime ministership of Sir Seewoosagur, and with the valuable input of Gaëtan Duval, Mauritian tourism began to grow 20% each year. Per capita income rose during the early 70s. The population growth dropped during the period 70 to 75, and between 1972 and 1978, 67,000 new jobs were created. Sir Seewoosagur guided international relations with cunning and wisdom, winning favor with both the West and the East. His overseas diplomats sought and found a role for themselves on international forums out of proportion to the size of their tiny island. In 1973, Sir Seewoosagur was awarded the United Nations Prize for Human Rights and was elected President of the Organization of African Unity in 1976.
As late Governor-General Sir Dandranath Baranchabe puts it, Sir Seewoosagur Ramgoolam wanted to wipe out a tear from every eye. In fact, he was the first to introduce half a century ago the concept of the welfare state as we know it today.
I remember he had asked Professor Titmuss and Mead to come here to look at how we could set up the welfare state and what could be done to improve it. They were rather pessimistic in their report, but he said no, it can be done, and he actually did it.
All Mauritians now enjoy the security of access to free medical attention. Medicine in the country has advanced to the stage where open-heart surgery is performed daily. Sir Seewoosagur's concerns for the aged, dating back to when he was a colonial councillor in 1940, were eventually addressed under his government, and today an admirable pension scheme is accessible to all citizens. The inauguration of the University of Mauritius was one element of Sir Seewoosagur's endeavours to revolutionize education in Mauritius.
I remember when he was proposing free education, a lot of people in the press, in the opposition, were criticizing it as if it's a measure that we cannot afford, that it would ruin the country. And I remember reading all these papers, one day asking the question, I said, do you really think we can afford free education? And he said to me, there's no price to pay for free education. That is the only way that we can bring people forward and make this country progress later on.
Chacha's political career had spanned 4 decades, in which time he had seen most of his dreams realized. As the father of the nation, he raised a strong, stable and proud child. But as with all strong children, there comes a day when they question their fathers and turn themselves away to forge their own destiny.
Sir Seewoosagur was, as I said, a crafty politician, very cunning, very skillful, who knew how to organize his party and his followers to achieve an objective. And once that objective was achieved, he started to reveal his other weaknesses.
Although it was he who brought the voting age down from 21 to 18, Chacha and the Labour Party lost ground in the 1976 elections, giving way to the younger, more energetic leaders of the Mouvement Militant Mauritian. Politics and politicians are not kind to the sensitivities of the players. Chacha was growing tired. He had mellowed down with age, and he had failed to groom a successor in his place. During his final term, he and the Labour Party were relentlessly battered by the virulent opposition who sunk their claws into members of the government, accused and at times convicted of corruption.
The world economy was slowing down. We had a recession in the world. So it was a difficult period. He had a very small majority. He had then some people who were contesting things from inside the party, which made it very difficult.
I don't know. Many people still believe that he should have, after the election of 1976, he should have gone, should have vacated his, given to somebody else.
I cannot say 100% because at one point we were telling him, the family was telling him that we think he should not go for another election. And I've witnessed it. At one point he agreed, and he called in some people in the party to try to sort out the leadership problem. But it could not be sorted out. Whether he did it just to show us that he was trying or whether he genuinely wanted to, I can't say.
So 1982 was a tide wave. You know, the time had come. It was very sad to see everything crumbling. You know.
It was a big defeat. You see, to the first time, you see, we lost all the seats. It's unprecedented.
It was very tough, but he was a great gentleman. There were pictures in the press. That's, I think, probably the first time that he allowed himself to be photographed without his glasses on. He was a broken man, without a tie. Can you imagine Chacha without a tie? But you had this picture of him without a tie, without his glasses, crushed. So we had the speech from the throne in the old speech of the throne hall, and you have these stairs that climb in Government House, and the old man had recovered and came. Of course, we invited him. He came on his own and climbed those stairs slowly, with all of us and the civil servants and so on clapping. And it was something very, very special.
After 82, he felt that a lot of people he had done a lot of things for had actually just switched side. And but this is the price of politics, I suppose.
It was no secret that Chacha's last political wish was to be the first president of Mauritius. Even the non-Labour government recognized the exigency of designating the honourable post to Chacha. But the bill that would have made Mauritius a republic was not passed by Parliament, and so the only option open for Chacha was to become the country's Governor-General and to retire to State House in Laredwi. The death of Lady Seewoosagur Ramgoolam, his wife and companion of 43 years, took a final toll on the old man.
Yeah, big effect on him, very definitely. Because there was a big age gap between them. I don't think he expected my mother to die before him at all.
Chacha's health deteriorated further, and from the majestic halls of Laredwi, the Right Honourable Dr. Sir Seewoosagur Ramgoolam watched the Mauritius that he had built and nurtured slip from his hands.
I would have thought, this man really deserves, some rest, do something else. That was my personal opinion, of course. But I think a man who's worked so long for something doesn't give up, he doesn't stop. That's his destiny.
At one point I came in the room and I was sitting with him and I saw that he was probably suffering from his face. And I said to him, "Why don't you let me give you some of these painkillers?" He said no. And that was the day he was going to die. And I said to him, it was pointless. You've got these painkillers here, you're suffering. I think you should take some. And typical of him, he said, no, I would rather suffer the pain because I don't want my mind to be clouded when I die.
On the 15th of December, 1985, Dr. the Right Honourable Sir Seewoosagur Ramgoolam died at State House, Luridwi. The death of Chacha was felt throughout the nation. Political expediency was tossed out the window for just a moment, to be replaced by an exhibition of mourning and respect never before witnessed on the island. Chacha was gone, but his spirit mingled with his people for the last time.
He was among the best at the time, so obviously. And he was interested in doing something for the country. That was the ideal I was speaking about before, you see, to do something for the country. I think that's what pushed him to... It was not for self-realization or anything of that type. No. He had some very definite ideals that he wanted to realize, I think.
He really loved Mauritius. To him, apart from his medicine, from his politics, from his T.S. Eliot, his great love was the people of Mauritius, his country, the Mauritius nation. I think we could learn to think a bit more of our country and less of ourselves. I think that's a lesson I would say we can learn from him.
I see him in very human terms. Like all of us, he had his lows and his highs, his ups and his downs, and it would be doing him a great disservice to try to deny him that humaneness.
His general lesson, the general message, I believe, is that tolerance, mutual respect, and handling with care a society as fragile, as delicate as ours.
He used to quote that you have to have a spirit of service to the country, not looking for something back, not worrying about what people are saying about you. Just put yourself at the service of the country.
There are lots of things which we can learn from Sir Seewoosagur Ramgoolam. In fact, his life and his works should be an inspiration for all of us. Perhaps it wouldn't be inappropriate, particularly at a time when we have been witnessing disturbances of all sorts, to recall his views that I'm sure you wouldn't mind my quoting his exact words. This is how it runs. Sir Seewoosagur said, "Peace and stability are the prerequisites of progress and advancement. Violence and intolerance anywhere, and more so in a small country like ours, will throw up more problems than they will solve. Violence and intolerance will inevitably lead to a halt in our continued and well-ordered social and political progress." I hope that those words of wisdom won't fall into deaf ears.
We are a people of many nations. Our communal instincts lie just under the surface, and in moments of weakness, they are easily aroused. Chacha, through his willingness to compromise, showed us a way forward. If we hold on to his wisdom, his vision, tenacity, and humility, we too can build an even better future for our children. That one day they may look back and remember us with the same love and tenderness with which we remember Chacha, the father of our nation.